Today's part talks about the New Kingdom, or it starts from the New Kingdom. We said that Ahmus, he invaded back Egypt, conquered Egypt, and defeated the Hyksos, kicked them out, and he began the New Kingdom, starting from 1550 to 1070. Now, after Ahmus died, a queen called Hatshepsut came to power. Before Hatshepsut came to power, her husband, the pharaoh, was ruling, but then he died suddenly. The second person in line, or the second pharaoh in line to rule, was the nephew, and he was very young. So Hatshepsut had to take over the rule. But the title pharaoh was only reserved for a man. She could not rule as a woman. So she had to dress up like a man and wore a fake beard. During Hatshepsut's reign, she developed the ancient Egyptian empire. She built a lot of kingdoms and restored old monuments that were destroyed by the war. Why? Hatshepsut had one reason, which is that she valued trade over going to war. The previous pharaohs, all their interests was to expand the land and take over the nearby areas. This is why they frequently went to war. Hatshepsut had a different idea of expansion, which is through trade. During her reign means the time of rule. She made efforts to restore the relationships with the nearby areas that were lost during the Hyksos invasion. So she let her sailors travel to the ports in Arabia and East Africa to exchange the goods and products that the Egyptians produced. These goods and products were beads, metal tools, and weapons. In exchange, Hatshepsut imported gold, ivory, ebony wood, and incense. Ivory, it's the white mineral that is extracted from the elephant's tusks. It's a very expensive, strong, pure element. Ebony wood is a type of wood that, unlike the other trees, is extremely black or night black. And incense are scents that are extracted from wood, flowers, and other natural resources. So this is what she imported, or what she got through the Egyptian empire. The wood products, where did the Egyptians get them from? They traveled east of the Mediterranean Sea to an area where the people lived were called Phoenicians. The Phoenicians is present-day Lebanon, or Lebanese people. These people were a little bit more advanced and developed than the Egyptians. Their culture impacted all of the surrounding communities, and it started impacting other faraway societies through trade. One of their main accomplishments that were more developed than the ancient Egyptians were the inventions of the alphabets and the system of writings. It was different than the other regions. Egyptians had symbols for words or icons, but the Phoenician system of writing had a different drawing or symbol for each and every letter and sound. And this is where the hieroglyphics are going to get the idea from. The Egyptians traded wheat, paper, gold, copper, tin, and other tools. This is what they exported to the Phoenicians in return for the purple dye, wood, and furniture. So in your notes, you need to write the imports and exports with Egypt and the Phoenicians, and Egypt and the area of Arabia and East Africa. So you need to know what did they import from the area of East Africa and what did they export to the area of East Africa. You also need to write down what did they import from the Phoenicians and what did they export to the Phoenicians. In return, the Phoenicians traded the Egyptian goods with other people. So when the Phoenicians took the Egyptian products, the Egyptian goods, they did not keep it in Phoenicia, but they took some of these goods and they also traded with it all across Asia. So the Egyptian goods not only reached Phoenicia, but extended and reached Asia. This trade helped make Egypt wealthier. And with this money, Hatshepsut was able to build the monuments and restore back the old buildings. The Egyptian kingdom also developed ties with a familiar kingdom that you will remember, which is the Babylonian Empire. The people at that time in the Babylonian Empire were known as the Hittites, or the Hittite Empire. What happened is Hatshepsut made allies, or she promised them continuous trade and peace and no wars. This was the first time in history that a group of nations, which is the Babylonian Empire, the Egyptian Empire, the Phoenicians, and the area of East Asia, they all work together to reach common goals, which is the expansion of their empires in peace through trading. And this was all done based on the idea of Hatshepsut. Now, when Hatshepsut died, remember that young nephew that was supposed to rule, Thutmose III? Of course, now he became of age and he became the pharaoh. But as all the previous pharaoh men, he began expanding Egypt through war again. He wanted to control all the area to the north of the Euphrates River, which is the area of Mesopotamia, and he wanted to control all the area to the south that reaches Nubia. This idea made him go into wars. Egypt's armies conquered more areas. As the empire grew wealthy and grew big, the idea of slavery became more common. The slaves were either very poor Egyptians or poor people or people that of the areas that they conquered. During the time of Thutmose III, Egypt had gold, copper, ivory, and other valuable goods from the conquered people. So he dropped the idea of trading, the idea of peace, and instead he would go into wars with the nearby areas, and he would take over the goods of the conquered people and turn these conquered people into slaves. Now, during the New Kingdom, there were two pharaohs, Amenhotep V and Tutankhamun. Two of them ruled in different ways, and they were the most famous or unusual pharaohs of that time. Osama, I think this is the video you're talking about. Amenhotep IV came to power during the 1370 BC, and he wanted to change Egypt's religion. Before Amenhotep, people worshipped many gods or many deities, which are not only gods but priests of higher authorities that acted as gods. So, to make things short, people resisted Amenhotep, the priests resisted Amenhotep, so he failed and he could not change the religion of Egypt. He tried to join or introduce the idea of worshipping a certain god, which is the sun god, Aton. And he removed the priests who opposed these ideas. He also changed his name to Akhenaton, and he made Akhenaton a city north of Thebes, the capital of Egypt. But all these changes were not accepted by the Egyptians, and therefore Akhenaton could not continue ruling, and he was considered as a weak ruler. During his time of reign, Egypt lost most of its land in Western Asia. Now, King Tut, or Tutankhamun, was the nephew of Akhenaton who ruled after him. He only ruled at the age of 10, and because he was so young, his rule was based on the advice of priests and government officials. So the first thing that he did was that he returned the religion of polytheism and worshipping many gods and deities. King Tut died unexpectedly after ruling for 9 years, so he died at the age of 19. His tomb was discovered in 1922 and it was perfectly preserved. During that time, most of the tombs were robbed by thieves, but not for the pharaohs because they were locked down in very deep underground tombs. During the 1200s, the pharaohs worked hard after King Tut to restore Egypt. Ramses II ruled from 1279 to 1213. He conquered the region of Canaan and he fought with the Hittites. If you remember, the Hittites were the people who lived in the Phoenician area, which is present-day Lebanon. So Ramses II fought with these people, but at that time, it was in the region of Canaan, not in the region of Phoenicia. He built many new temples throughout Egypt. One of them is very famous up until today, and it's known as the Karnak. The temples were used for special occasions, and they were used to store valuable items. Egypt fought many costly wars during the time of Ramses II and later on, and the area was usually in the Eastern Mediterranean. In the 900s BC, the Libyans conquered Egypt, and then Kush seized power. Kush is the area south of Egypt. Finally, in 670 BC, Egypt was taken over by the Assyrians from Mesopotamia. This is where we're going to stop for today. Do you have any questions?
شكرا.
Okay. I'll see you tomorrow.
باي باي.
Bye.